don't know. I'm a total Luddite.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to tell you how impressed I am with what you've been doing. First of all, I think like you have to be super brave. I don't know where you get the cojones from, but like, wow. And it inspires me to be more assertive and really speak up. I think it's so contagious when people behave the way and just also um, uh, you're so soft spoken. Like Billboard Chris does some of this stuff too, but as a guy, it's different. It's like I feel like you really break through, and I've been watching some of the young people that you speak to there, and I can see, even on camera, like their eyes, and they're registering it. They're not going to be able to express it, right away, but I feel like you're really like getting into their psyche. So like, wow, amazing. And thank you for doing that. Yeah, it's just amazing.
Sure. I mean, I think there's lots of videos where I do look hysterical, and people say that why don't you behave more like Billboard Chris and let them talk to you? But when I get hysterical, it's because I can't believe this is happening and what happened to my daughter. So I'm always so happy when I do see one where I look calm because they're not. There's
Well, no,
there's
I
lots
mean,
of
I
other
can see
ways.
you getting upset, but
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
You're reacting like a normal human, and I think it's normal, and it's okay to get upset. They should see that their actions
Yeah.
have consequences, and that's a
Right.
consequence. You're upsetting a person who just wants to talk to you. Like
Yeah.
that's like the essence of being human. Like
Right.
I just it's anyway. So we used to do a podcast on restored childhood. I haven't done anything in a very, very long time, but I was hoping to release the conversation and put it on the Substack just because I know how contagious courage is. It really is. And I don't think you're getting anywhere near enough press or attention. So whatever I can do, the small amount.
Sure.
So
Thanks.
let's just talk. I
Yeah.
think you and I are about the same age. I'm 54.
Yeah.
You're about my age as well,
I'm 56. I was born in 70.
and I'm 71. So
Okay.
so just tell me a little bit about yourself. You're based in California now? Were you born in California? How this trajectory happened, about your, whatever you can share about your family, and
Sure.
yeah, anything you want to share.
Sure. So I think and I often think about this. What is it about my life or my upbringing or my family that made me feel differently than my liberal friends when I first started hearing about, these transgender kids in our town? So I was born in Washington, D.C., in Bethesda, Maryland, and my father worked in the Foreign Service. And so we grew up overseas, mostly in Mexico City is where I grew up. And then we moved back to the US. But I think I did feel like an outsider. This was like middle of eighth grade. Like I'm seeing the world differently because I've lived now, in other countries, and I'm living in suburbia, San Diego. And my mother's also a registered nurse. And my parents, my dad was in the Foreign Service, but they're conservative. And so I think I just grew up kind of questioning a lot, because I knew there was corruption in this world and governments that could lie or take over a country. So yeah, I did though, after college, I became out liberal. I was Democrat
Did
probably
you
to this
speak
last
both
few years.
languages? You were raised in Mexico City for the first few
Right.
years. Are you bilingual?
I was there from third to ninth grade, or end of eighth grade, but we were at the American school. So it's an international school. And my friends were mostly Americans and I had a lot of Japanese friends and other countries, where my sister's friends were mostly, kids that were Mexican. And so she became fluent, instantly. And then I still was not fluent when I left. But I actually had, what, 10 years of Spanish. So I can understand it pretty well. But
Okay.
yeah, so there's that difference, if your friends are speaking that language versus just learning it in school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's
yeah, my
immersive.
sister's
Yeah.
a bilingual teacher here in the Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
Um, so but I worked at the university after being a city planner. I had two kids. Um, but when I first started hearing about, it was one of my daughter's classmates in kindergarten class, and the mother, I think, studied at Columbia. You know, um, Everyone in this town has, a master's or a PhD, just about. And she said her second son of three boys was transgender. My liberal friends all around me were like, "Oh, this is so wonderful that we can support this child." And I remember having this feeling in the pit of my stomach, like, "Gosh, this doesn't seem right. Like, how would she know?" He started wearing little ballet dresses, but he was like 3 years old. Like, how would you know your child's transgender?
What year
But
was
I
this?
didn't really think, yeah, I didn't think much about it. But then, newspaper articles started coming out in our town about,
When was
other.
this? What year? What
So
year
this
was
is 20, see, my daughters were in 2005, so it'd been 2012,
oh,
2013.
early?
Yeah, so these are, I'm noticing, wait, all these white liberal women, with advanced degrees, oftentimes they were lesbian couples, were announcing their transgender children, at my daughter's elementary school. But I didn't really do anything about it. Like I didn't research it. I didn't really like think, wow, this is kind of, where is this coming from? But when my daughter was in seventh grade and she had announced that she had a trans identity, so this would have been I want to say 2017, 2018. I was like, wait, you're transgender? I mean, I don't know how I exactly said it, but I was like, this doesn't sit well with me. And that's when I started doing some research, and it was really her psychiatrist who suggested I read the article that had just come out by Jesse Singal in the Atlantic. It was about parents who were questioning this. They were East Coast parents who had told their daughters that no, we're not going to support this transgender identity, and the girls were desisting. But that was all I really had. I had that one article, and then I found, I think, Fourth Wave Now and Will Malone. But I wasn't on Twitter, so I mean, that would have made a big difference. So yeah, I just fought back. But I worked at the university. I'm in a university town. I think it's only 10% Republican and maybe 65, 70% Democrat and 20, undecided. So it's this huge number of highly educated liberal people living in a small town, and everyone's captured. The schools, the university, the medical care system, the therapists.
It's like a cartel. Yeah,
Yes.
they run things. Not, and I'm assuming there's not a lot of religious observation there, or maybe I don't know. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's it really interesting because I sent out a letter to about 50 of the faith groups in town. So I found the mosques, the synagogue, all the Christian churches I could find, the Korean Christian church, First Baptist, the Methodist. And I sent this letter to everybody saying, look, this is what's in our schools. We're teaching kids this. And, this is the medical part that I've been working on. And I think at that point, Reuters had written an article sort of on my story. And then the UK, oh, it's escaping me. It must be the Economist UK. They wrote an article based off of an interview with me as well. And I shared these two articles, and I got back some really angry messages, including from this synagogue here in town saying, how dare you say things like this? We're going to donate $100 to I don't know what group it was, trans equality. Um, but I did find a few churches, and one of the pastors at the First Baptist Church came and met with me, and we talked about what was happening. And he actually was so kind. He wrote a letter in response to everybody else. He like replied all and said, maybe Beth has some good points. And he brought up what was happening in Sweden and Finland and Norway. This is like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And he just said, maybe we should listen to her, or maybe she has some points. And I think that was a point time in that I realized, depending on what church you were, going to in Davis, you were going to hear something very different. And
Mhm.
so the churches like we have another big mega church called Bayside here in town. Um, they were very good about saying no, there's only men and women, and we know something is evil here in the world, but we have a very liberal synagogue here in town, and they were very captured. So I mean, I have since then met conservative Jews who've really helped me out. Um,
Yeah.
and I think the mosques in town, the Muslims, they need to stay very quiet on this issue
Yes.
because, so they're really not going to say too much. But the Korean church, they let me come and talk and meet with people, and so it
What were
just
the art?
depends.
What were the articles? Well, yeah, I think that the
Yeah.
progressives, the religious progressives, the Reform synagogues, the more
Yeah.
progressive Reform churches, I think that's really where
Yeah.
all of this is also being incubated. So,
Yes, yeah, the Methodist Church, when it split, the
yeah,
United Methodist in our town, they just pushed the transgenderism harder than anyone else. Flags everywhere, and then also of course, the Unitarian Universal Church.
I have
It,
I have a lot of theories on the Unitarian Universalists and how, they're really very much part of the UN. And
right.
they're pushing this stuff around the world. If you look at the Unitarian Universalist Association website, you will
Hmm.
see a blueprint for everything, all of the
Hmm.
racial, gender, environmental justice agendas that are being pushed across, all of Europe and the United States. So it's funny that you should mention the Unitarians.
Yes. Hmm.
Talking about them quite a bit with our friends in Colorado, Kelly and Aaron, and because they're very active there as well.
Right, right.
So, what are the articles that you were share or that Reuters had written? Because I think I'm not quite sure how you landed on the map at that point. What did you do?
You mean why was I being interviewed?
Yeah.
And I think Abigail Schreier also interviewed me back then too. Um, I must have just been, let's see. So Aaron Friday's been a friend of mine for a long time.
Mhm.
And she might have made the contact for me, but I think people knew that I had all the records of Kaiser Permanente trying to, push my daughter to get on puberty blockers and hormones. And I had, kept really careful records because I was divorced. Yeah, I didn't mention that. When my daughter was only 5 and my son was 3, my husband wanted a divorce. And so that's sort of some trauma. That happened early on, but I think it really taught me to keep very careful records of everything. So I got really good at every time I spoke to a doctor or a therapist or a school principal, school counselor, taking really good notes, making sure my ex-husband saw it. And this is before the trans stuff. But it's been good because I've, now been able to work with the Federal Trade Commission and their attorneys on their investigation and share, all of my records from, how they wanted me to medicalize my daughter. So, yeah, I'm not sure why I did get to do some really interesting interviews, and I think the articles came out. The Reuters one was very specific about what was happening here in Oakland at the pediatric gender clinic that my daughter was um, referred to, and she never went, but they suggested, hey, you should go to this. It's a one-stop shop here in Oakland, and she can meet with an, or it's not they, of course they would have said he, your child can meet with an endocrinologist, a gender specialist, an OBGYN, and we can really help them, be their authentic self, or I don't, that kind of thing. And it was a first appointment, and we were just there because my daughter was feeling dizzy, and my ex-husband and I were in the exam room together because I was like, if our child's going to go see a doctor, I'm going to be in the exam room. And so my ex-husband was referring to my daughter with this new name and the pronouns, and the Kaiser pediatrician was so excited. Oh, I hear your dad's, calling you Ian. Would you like me to change your chart here and tell me what pronouns you use? And that's when she made the suggestion. And so I called the next day and I was like, how dare you suggest to my daughter that she go to this Kaiser gender clinic without first asking us if we would even, support this? I'm like, you just put this idea in her head that there's this medical pathway. So, yeah.
Did your daughter want to go? Or how did things work
Oh,
out?
she did. A few months later, she wrote a letter, and I think you can find a template online that says, you know, I mean, first is the coming out letter, but then the next letter is, I've given this some thought and I'd really like to consider going on puberty blockers and testosterone. And I've done research. And then she had her citations because she's very smart, 13-year-old to, I think it was Planned Parenthood, um, WPATH, and the Endocrine Society. Like, we know that, it's just a pause and that there's no long-term effects. Or, she had kind of like found these, whatever, professional societies like WPATH and Endocrine Society. And she just believed them. And I think my ex-husband believed it too. And so I, uh, I was in a really lucky position though, where her psychiatrist had shared with me that a young teen had come to her in Davis saying they were non-binary. And when the parents met with the endocrinologist in one appointment, they wanted to put the child on, I think, blockers. And so the psychiatrist said to me, I don't think it's really safe necessarily for your daughter to talk with any medical people. And so I begged her to please tell my ex-husband and my daughter, um, or whatever, that we won't do anything until she's 18. And so I think I remember this appointment. I think there was some relief on my daughter's face that, oh, wait, my parents have just said I can't medicalize till I'm 18. And so that's what I can tell my friends, that I really want to do this.
Oh.
I want to do it all, but my parents are saying no.
Oh my God, she was looking for some guardrails and
Yes,
all these
exactly.
kids that are looking for guardrails and the parents are like, "What did you want to do? Cut off your
Yes.
breast? Let's go make an appointment."
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Our pediatrician a few years ago, she's wonderful. And I spoke to her about this. And she said, I've never had children who've come out as anything other than what they are, like a different sex. She said, and this was a couple of years ago, she's like, and in the past year, I've had like six. And
Yeah.
and several of them had gotten their breasts removed and
Yeah.
one of them came in and asked our doctor when they would grow back.
Oh my God.
And it was like,
Yeah. And they believe it, or at least they believe that a breast implant, in the future would bring them back, right? They don't understand that, yeah, those mammary glands are gone forever.
it's just so heartbreaking. So,
Yeah.
so what happened next? I mean, so your daughter is okay and out of the gender cult at this point, or
We've been estranged now for almost 3.5 years since she was 17. And it was actually on her birthday after we'd gone on this big trip to Japan. Um, and we went to Thailand. But I kind of knew it was coming, right? Because she'd already said I wanted to be at dad's house more. But, of course it was on her 17th birthday, after the cake and the presents. Um, um, so but so they did a big article on us in the Sacramento Bee. It's like 5 pages, front page feature story, and they did these incredible videos and photos, and it frames me as being anti-trans, and it says the divide between, I think, the anti-trans mother and the non-binary child, and there's a picture of my daughter and me on the front, and they interview her in the story, and so she shared a lot in that story. But I still, it does make me uncomfortable sharing things about my daughter. But I also know that someone has to tell the story, right? And so she still identifies as non-binary, and or at least from what I can tell. Um, but she uses a traditional female name now, and she's beautiful. She looks like a beautiful young woman. And but I tell people, why would you want to leave, the LGBTQ community when they're the nicest, sweetest kids? They're quirky, they're fun, they're theater kids, um, they're loving, they're accepting, and so and then you have a mom who, for many people in this town, they think I'm the most dangerous, awful person in town. So it wouldn't surprise me at this age that you want to be closer to your friends, that normal individuating you would have anyways at 17, 18, 19.
Mhm.
Um, so there's
And
that.
I've also talked to parents who've had pretty bad outcomes, and they said that no matter how hard their kids, their young adult kids, tried to leave the gender cult, they would never let them leave. Like you can't really,
Yeah.
they won't let you. They're always like, oh, we're here for you. They're always like kind of a landing pad, and it's very
Hmm.
hard to escape.
And I also think there's some loyalty to her dad, who I think, and her stepmom, who I know love her very much. And because they have affirmed this all along, and the, paternal grandparents, my ex-in-laws, it's hard also to say to all of them too, maybe that, mom was right. This isn't, I'm just
That's
a
a good
young
point.
woman.
That's a really good point. What about you? Are your parents still around?
My mom is 88 or 89, but my dad passed away maybe 6 years ago. So uh yeah, but it's been really nice because my mom has really been a big support from the beginning, and it helps her being a registered nurse too, where she can point to other medical scandals in the past, and
Right.
yeah. And I mean, I know my mother was told not to breastfeed my three older brothers because formula is safer or better or healthier or more nutritious than breast milk. So she didn't breastfeed her first three kids, and she was a nurse. And so just thinking about stories like that, kind of helped me put this in perspective. Like, it, you know why would you trust doctors? Why would you trust pharmaceutical companies?
Well, I mean, and you think about like COVID, the closures, the isolation. One of the first things they told us was to keep kids away from their grandparents. Don't
Yes.
kill grandma, because I think they knew that grandparents,
Hmm.
for the most part, would bring
Hmm.
generational knowledge and stories just like the one you just told me that would bring things into perspective. It was like the kid is a numerator. They're like, oh, it's just, and the grandparents a denominator. Like it's context, and they, what they did when they divided everyone was remove the context. So anything that came up.
That's fascinating. And my mother's in San Diego, and throughout COVID, she never stopped playing bridge with a group of like 8, 10 other, 70, 80-year-olds. And they played indoors all the time, every other day, never stopped. And she said, we're not going to worry about it. We want to keep playing bridge. We don't know how much longer we have to live. And,
Right.
we're going to do this. And then in the meantime, I have, close friends who are like wearing masks while we walk outside 10 feet apart, and
Mhm.
the numbers are super low. I'm like, what is going on here? My mother is living her life, and we have to act like one little germ's going to come out of our mask outside and we're going to kill each other. Yep. Yeah, it was crazy.
It does seem like education, and I used to love academia. I went to NYU undergrad and grad.
Yeah.
I'm in New York City, former progressive, so I love that whole world. But it does seem like they educated us away from the truth instead of
Yeah.
helping us find the truth and honesty. And it's really hard to come to terms with that because you feel very homeless. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's where I think religion and
Yeah.
grandparents and family, things that are really basic, like people are constantly, we screen 15 days. And after the film, people are like, "So what do you want parents to do? What do you want people to do?" And I'm like, "Cook together." And they're just kind of like, but like policy wise, like what should they
Yeah.
do? And I'm like, just yesterday I saw Robert Kennedy, who I think is probably the greatest Secretary of Health and Human Services, and really uses all of those words to define
Yeah.
what he's trying to do, said, families need to learn how to cook and eat together. It's simple. You don't need to go to college to understand these things. My father is a plumber. My mother is a bookkeeper. We came here from the Soviet Union when I was 6. Nobody went to higher education, in part because in the Soviet Union they didn't really want Jews getting, getting to higher
Hmm.
education. They're both very, very smart, and but there's never been any kind of moral ambiguity, and they kind of understood pretty quickly about what COVID was too. I mean, initially you kind of watch and wait and be cautious, but eventually you do enough research and you observe and trust your senses
Right.
enough that
Right.
you can get to an objective truth. Like you can't be relying on like propaganda to be
Right.
redefining your life. But that's kind of what we've done in this country, which is
Right.
astonishing to me. It didn't take
Yeah.
long either, did it? It was very quick.
No, no, no. Yeah.
Quick, but okay, so just because I don't want to take too much of your time, I want
Oh,
to
sure.
understand what you're doing right now, because all I keep seeing are some really incredible and somewhat scary videos of you going out there seemingly on your own or with very few people behind you. Like, what is your goal? What is the strategy?
Yeah,
What are you doing? And what's your like plan, for the next 6 months or few?
sure. So, I think when I first started speaking out, I wasn't even using my real name or I had on a disguise. And so this kind of built up, right? I didn't like start doing these sort of crazy stunts. But I am like, they're not really listening to me. I'm going to the school board meeting. I'm, reading my prepared script about what I'm seeing in the schools. Or I'm, I was holding all these forums here at our Davis Public Library. So I brought Colin Wright out
Hmm.
to speak. Um, and then I did a big event on the unfairness of having boys and girls sports. And some of those actually did end up making national, international news because our event got shut down by the librarian, and then all the bomb threats started anyway. So some of these stories did get kind of big. But mostly I was just doing public forums, giving public comment. And then I think, what were some of the first videos? Oh, I think the first video I might have done that really went viral was when I was in Hawaii and I happened to come across these drag queens in the hotel lobby. And as I'm at the elevator, these other adults are upset about it. And I just say, well, I'm going to go back there, talk to these drag queens. And then my son had just learned in school like 2 months earlier that cross-dressing and drag is really healthy and normal, and lots of it actually said that lots of heterosexual people enjoy cross-dressing, and it's normal, and drag queens are wonderful. And so when I
The
saw these
teachers,
drag
by the way, the teachers unions pushed all that in because I saw an
yeah,
AFT newsletter for their members that was published in 2014 or 15, and it was all about pushing drag into schools.
yes,
I mean,
yes,
it was astonishing. It was literally that the whole thing was
yes,
about creating safe spaces for
right,
gender, and it wasn't just about acceptance. Acceptance is one thing, like we all.
right,
It was about I mean, grooming is the best way I can.
yes,
So what you're
yes.
saying is not shocking to
Right.
me.
And in the slides that they use here in the California Department of Ed, approved curriculum, while they show kids this idea that cross-dressing and drag queens are good, they also start showing pictures of examples of trans women. I think it's Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, and was it RuPaul? Anyways, they show these men in these. Actually, there's another celebrity who's a trans woman, but so they're telling kids, hey, it's fun to dress up in makeup, boys in makeup and female clothing because cross-dressing is fun and normal. Oh, and then here's these trans women, and so my mind when I saw these drag queens and they were dressed like so like sexual, like Barbie dolls. Anyways, it was just kind of gross. And so I said something and I filmed it and they filmed me. And, I got kicked out of the hotel, but I'd already was ready to check out. It was my last day and they refunded my whole 1 week vacation there, 2 rooms.
Great.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think I was with my brother and my son and they my son didn't see it, but my brother was like, "Wow, you were really confrontational there in the police," but he kind of knew that what I was doing was right. Um, and I was like, whatever
The
comes of this,
police
I
came?
know what.
Wait, hold on. The police came?
Oh yeah, they called the police right away, and so
What is,
they actually handcuffed me. They handcuffed me,
wait,
took me up to my hotel room, and I have it all recorded, and
wait,
I've
wait,
shown.
wait, 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 hold on. What did you, can you tell me what you said to these people that got you handcuffed and
Oh
that's
sure,
crazy.
yeah, and I can share the
Yeah,
videos
yeah.
got like 5 million views or something.
Oh, yeah, we should
Um,
totally share.
Yeah, I basically just said, this is misogyny, this is degrading. I didn't pay, all this money to stay in a hotel room where there was going to be drag queens in the hotel lobby. My kid's upstairs. I don't want to see this. And then I started talking about, why are you telling, boys that they should be able to put on bras and stuff them and, um, wear makeup and do all this stuff so they can look like women. And then I started talking about the medical part. And I said something like, there are boys who are losing their penises. I get really like dramatic
Yeah.
because I had just learned that. I think I just learned about Jazz Jennings only being 17 years old. So, um, but within 2 days, maybe the university came out with this big statement condemning my behavior. And and that maybe got 1 million views. So the university said, we don't support this employee. What she did was offensive. Um, and and I'm on vacation. Why can't I say what I want to say when I'm on my own vacation in Hawaii? This is a public institution. So in this case, I'm not working at a corporation. In a public institution, you can share your views, during your free time. And a lot of people agreed with me. So while I had a lot of people hating me, a lot of people agreed with me. But what I thought was interesting was the liberal women in town who are TERFs or, gender critical. They didn't like my style of like telling, these drag queens, I don't want this. And they thought I was too I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but they wanted me to come off nicer, and I just thought I said sorry, that's just who I am, and I know maybe you don't like that kind of style, but a lot of people do, and so a lot of people, and I'm sure it was more maybe people who are either religious or just more conservative were like go lady, like that's what everyone should say when you see a drag queen in a public setting around kids. This isn't a nightclub of adults, this is
Right.
in a hotel lobby on Sunday morning. And it, I couldn't avoid it, right? You couldn't walk out of the hotel without walking through these drag queens. So that was my first experience. And I was like, having your phone out and saying something and then recording it, that's a really powerful message. Like that's more powerful than me going to my local school board meeting in some ways. So I just started doing a little bit more. And there's some really viral moments when I was at UC Davis during the encampment with the pro-Palestine professors and students. And I realized that the Jewish students and professors, they were feeling unsafe because they had taken over the entire like central part of the quad, and they
They
had
were
all these.
unsafe. They were getting attacked. They weren't just feeling it. They were unsafe.
Yes, yeah. And so even though that wasn't the issue, I just stood there with my gender critical signs and I was attacked. And one of the professors said, "You should put a gun in your mouth, you piece of shit." And it got, you know, and so that kind of went viral. And I never got an apology from the university. I'm sure she probably didn't even get, written up. I think Dennis Prager, though, on his show, like the next day, he said, "Hey, I love this lady, Beth Bourne in Davis. She's speaking out. She says she's going to these encampments and, telling them that they're all being told lies." So that was kind of another moment where I'm like, hmm. he's a really smart guy. He appreciates what I'm doing. And so I just kept doing different things like that. And Liv's a TikTok has been a huge, huge support for
Great.
me. She'll share a lot of my stuff that I see in the schools and a lot of my public comments at school board meetings. And we go to the California legislature a lot to speak out on these
Oh,
bills.
good. So,
So
so
yeah,
like,
so I yeah.
yeah, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so in the next 6 months, I think this last video I did a bunch at the anti-ICE protests here in town where I asked students or principals, hey, I support Trump. I support law enforcement, and they just go ballistic and they're trying to, attack me with bottles and cans. So again, it's like, okay, this young group of students, hundreds of students here in Davis and our local towns next to Davis, Winters, they're being told that they should march and go out there. And then I show up with my sign and I want to practice my free speech. And these kids, they become dangerous. And then the school principal or they're kind of blaming me. And I'm like, wait a second. You're the
Mhm.
one who told your students that they can take off from class. This is during class instruction time, march out of school. You're marching with them. And so are, four or five other teachers, hundreds of kids. And wait, they're not mature enough to handle a woman with, it was Trump Vance make women's sports female again. So I was just trying to point out that Trump is supporting women. And that was my message, right? Um, and I'm attacked for it.
And
So,
do you go with one other person? How do you?
I've just been going by myself, and I finally learned how to hold my phone. If you hold your phone like this, you can get yourself, actually like this, right? You can get yourself and the other person in the camera.
Oh,
So
wow. I thought
I've
you
kind
were
of
with someone. Oh my
no, I'm
God,
always by myself, just because I don't want to put someone else in this unsafe situation, right?
but you're
So
unsafe. I mean, how do you like how do you steel yourself or something like that? Most people
yeah,
won't even say the wrong word. Like
yeah.
that's just like a complete like other side of the spectrum. How do you do that?
And I think it's just incrementally
Mhm.
over the last 5 years, I feel strong enough to do a little bit more and to take a little bit more criticism. Um, I'm
Wow.
not going to take more risk to my personal safety though. So it's okay for me to show up to the Democratic convention and speak out because there were all these police officers around me. But 20 minutes earlier, I was in a crowd of the trans activists, and as soon as they recognized me, I realized I was unsafe, and so I just took off. So so I'm very aware of where is police enforcement and not letting people know where I'm going to be next. So
Okay. And I guess, yeah, I mean, I see, I think after Charlie Kirk's murder, I think many have become emboldened. And also,
right,
even before that, the United Healthcare CEO being assassinated just a few blocks away from
yeah,
where we live in Manhattan as well. I mean, I felt like those assassinations were about far more than just executing the specific individual, as incredible as Kirk was. I think it was a sign, a symbol, like a
right,
message that we're progressing into another phase, like a more violent
right,
phase. So when I watch, other
yeah,
friends who do that, I'm always kind of amazed. Like, I feel like, are you taking this seriously enough? Or maybe I'm just too paranoid, about all this. But I mean, obviously, you're definitely within your rights.
yeah,
You're doing the right
yeah,
thing. I just hope that you're taking all the
yeah. Well, I
precautions.
tell people if I was in Seattle or Portland or Minneapolis or New York or there's different cities where it would be incredibly more dangerous,
Hmm.
given that the people in that city. This is a pretty small town, um, and it's just a little different here. So, but yeah, there's lots of factors I
Have
take
you
into
had
account.
people? I mean, I saw you speaking to this young trans. I guess it was a young man who was dressed as a woman, and you had a pretty long conversation with him. In the last couple of weeks. Do
Yeah.
some of them ever reach out to you and say thanks for that, thanks for helping, or is there positive?
Oh, there is a lot of positive. Yeah. Um, like there's one I did where the student was still in high school, and he approached me and wanted to share, that he was on estrogen and that he didn't hated his body. And he was kind of calling me names, but I'm like, your body's perfect, like you gotta like think a little more about this. You're wonderful, you're perfect. And when I saw him maybe 4 or 5 weeks later at the Pride Festival in Davis, he was with the same kind of group of friends and he was laughing and we were laughing and he's like, remember what you said about me? And so I don't think he like dropped his trans identity, but I think he didn't see me as this evil person, right? He
Mhm.
saw me as just a mom or a human who was just saying, you got to think about this maybe a little differently. And so I think that's the case for a lot of these people. Like, I hope they get the essence that I'm not trying to hurt them, right? I'm like, I'm just sharing that this could be something really, that people are taking advantage of just that normal discomfort you have being a teenager.
Yeah, I think
So,
they need to hear that message, and I think it's really as
yeah,
simple as that. And it's not discriminating against anyone. It's trying to prevent those individuals from doing irreversible damage, as Abigail
yeah,
Shriver called it. I always think of that.
yeah,
No way back,
yeah,
you know?
right, right.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Beth. First of all, I'm grateful for your time and also
Oh,
your
yeah.
voice and your courage and just being who you are. Like, I think it's an
Mm,
incredible gift to people. So thank you. All
sure.
right,
Thanks.
I'm gonna stop recording this
Okay.
and let's see where if I can find. I got a new laptop too. Stop recording. Okay, yes.